It's been nearly 27 years since the body of Jerry Lombard was found decomped in a wooded field in Charlotte County. All this time later, his killer is still at large. Or is he? The murder of Lombard has quite a few parallels to the actions of suspected serial killer Daniel Conahan, who is currently on death row for the 1996 slaying of Richard Montgomery. Detectives have been unable to make official links to the two, but are hopeful that an anonymous tip could breathe new life into this cold case. For years, Lombard went unidentified, having been referred to as John Doe No. 1. The mystery revolving around his murder started the day his body was found.
Two workers were driving on 776 at the north end of Charlotte County and saw some buzzards flying in the air, curious to know what was the cause of that, and went out into the woods and found a body.
The problem was that there was no ID on the victim nor anyone in the missing persons databases that matched his description. It didn't appear that John Doe had been in Charlotte County long and hadn't had much time to forge personal relationships. Detectives suspected that he was a hitchhiker making his way south and ultimately landing in Southwest Florida.
We know that shortly before the body was found, within about a month or so, there was some police interaction in Georgia where his name was run through the national database. He didn't have any known method of transportation, so we're assuming that he was either a hitchhiker and/or rode buses.
Fast forward 2 years to 1996, when detectives were investigating two additional murders that happened in the same general area, which ultimately led back to Daniel Conahan. Given that all the bodies were found within a half-mile of each other, it gave detectives reasons to start looking at Daniel Conahan and his potential relationship with John Doe.
Conahan was known to go to bus stops in Northport and in Fort Myers. He was known to pick up men, solicit men with promises of money to pose for light nude bondage. And then he would take them into the woods and string them up to a tree, take some photographs, and then walk behind them and cinch the knot and ultimately kill these young men.
Although it was always suspected that Conahan and John Doe were linked, it was difficult to prove, especially since detectives didn't know who their murder victim was. But when a recent genealogy hit finally gave John Doe a name, it gave investigators more information to dive into the life of who they now knew as Jerry Lombard, and it gave them cause to put fresh perspective on a Conahan link.
Daniel Conahan would go to homeless camps, to various shelters, Fort Myers, Salvation Army, and he would prey upon these men. And so what we're hoping for is perhaps someone who may have been in a shelter or may have been at one of these homeless areas or may have been on the bus, or maybe was the person who picked him up as a hitchhiker, come forward and give us some information that we desperately need to try to put together exactly what happened to Jerry and go forward from there in our investigation.
Cold case detectives would also love to hear from anyone who was familiar with Daniel Conahan back in the day and may have witnessed or been exposed to a possible connection between him and Lombard.
As far as Conahan is concerned, we're obviously looking for people that were associated with Mr. Conahan or in his world. He was a nurse at a local hospital here. He had a lot of interactions with people between Fort Myers and Northport. Anyone who may have seen Jerry Lombard or even knows Daniel Conahan, who might be able to share with us some information that would help us find out what happened to Jerry Lombard.
Daniel Conahan remains on death row while he appeals his murder conviction in the Montgomery slaying. But if enough evidence comes to light about his connection to the Jerry Lombard case or any of the other murdered men in Charlotte County, it could provide some long overdue justice for families who have gone decades without answers. And all it takes is one phone call. For Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers, I'm Trish Rout.